Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about AMD. As we can see over the last year, AMD is up 120%. Really good returns for AMD over the last year, while the rest of the market is only up 26%. So AMD is outperforming the market over the 1-year chart. So let's talk a little bit about their business model, their financial statement results for the third quarter, fourth quarter, and the full year, and then also try to value their company using a discounted cash flow model. So to start off, for AMD's business model, AMD was founded in 1969, and it's a company that makes money by researching, designing, building, and selling CPUs, GPUs, and computer hardware. AMD's business model is broken up into two operating segments, computer and graphics, and also enterprise. The computing and graphics segments of their business includes products built for desktop processors, chips and processing units, and GPUs for graphics processing. The enterprise segment of the business includes server processors and video game console technology. AMD's customers include PC gamers, data centers, governments, private companies, and educational institutions. And buyers in the computing market care about speed, performance, reliability, power efficiency, and compatibility. The company fills this demand and sells these products by working with partners in computer manufacturing, distribution, and retail. And the company's graphics cards are popular among gamers and production teams in film and television. Lastly, AMD also makes money by licensing their technology to other companies like Sony and Microsoft for use in their PlayStation and Xbox gaming consoles. By licensing its technology, patents, and trademarks, AMD can make money from royalty streams. So now that we've talked about their business model, let's look into their financial statement results for the third quarter, fourth quarter, and the full year. We can see right here, these are their results for the period ending September 30th, 2023, the third quarter. And we can see they had revenue for the third quarter of 2023 of about $5.8 billion, which is up 4% from $5.5 billion in the third quarter of 2022. So up 5% year over year for their third quarter revenue. Net income growth was a lot more impressive. We can see in the third quarter of 2023, they had net income of about $300 million, which is up from $66 million in the third quarter of 2022. That's an increase of about 353% year over year for AMD's bottom line net income. Obviously, this is great news for AMD. You love to see when a company is increasing in profitability. So this is great news for anybody who's a shareholder of AMD. Then if I scroll down here, we can see their balance sheet in the third quarter. At the end of the third quarter, they had $67 billion of total assets, and they had about $54 billion of equity. So you can see this company really relies mainly on equity. They don't really finance their operations by taking on any debt. Then lastly, we can see their cash flow statement for the third quarter of 2023. They had operating cash flow of $421 million in the third quarter, and they also repurchased about $500 million of common stock. So they're basically returning $500 million back to shareholders. And remember, when you repurchase common stock, you reduce the amount of outstanding shares that a company has while the market capitalization stays the same. So the ending result is that the share price increases, which might be one of the reasons why AMD's share price increased so much over the last year. Now we can see their financial results for the fourth quarter right here and also the full year. For the fourth quarter of 2023, ending on December 30th, 2023, they had revenue of $6 billion, up from $5.6 billion in the fourth quarter of 2022, an increase of 10% year over year. And then net income for the fourth quarter was even better than for the third quarter. We can see the growth was from $21 million in the fourth quarter of 2022 to $667 million in the fourth quarter of 2023, up 3,076% year over year. So this comes in pretty close to the earnings results we saw for Amazon when they were up 3,000% year over year in the fourth quarter. And so far, there haven't really been many companies that have been able to produce earnings growth of that magnitude. So obviously, that's very good news for AMD. Then we can see for the full year of 2023 compared to 2022, unfortunately, it looks like they had revenue decline from 23 billion to 22 billion, which is down about 4% year over year for the full year. And then for net income, we can see they also had a bit of a decline here from 1.3 billion to 854 million. That's a decline of 35% year over year for the net income. So obviously the impressive earnings growth for the third quarter and the fourth quarter wasn't enough to basically combat the decline in earnings they experienced in the first quarter. Then we can see their balance sheet for December 30th, 2023. Their total assets were about 67.8 billion, and then they had about 55 billion, pretty much exactly the same as the end of the third quarter. And then lastly, for their cash flow statement, we can see their operating cash flow for the fourth quarter and the full year, 380 million for the fourth, and then about 1.6 billion for the full year. And they repurchased about $1 billion of common stock in 2023, about 230 million in the fourth quarter. So now we can try and value their company using a DCF model so we can know if AMD is trading at a good buying price. We can see from this right here that the results aren't that optimistic. They're currently trading at about $26, or their intrinsic value per share is estimated to be about $26 per share, while their current share price is about $175 per share. So this obviously means basically that AMD is way overvalued at the moment based on the results of this DCF model. I got this $26 per share estimation by just taking the growth rate for their free cash flows for the last 5 years and then projecting that for the next 5 years. We can see that from 2019 to 2023, their free cash flow increased from 280 million to 1.12 billion, up about 32% compounded annually. I used a weighted average cost of capital metric of 12%, which I calculated right here. I just used some of their metrics like the interest rate on their long-term debt, the tax rate on their income statement, and then I used that to calculate their cost of equity and the weighted average cost of capital here. And that's what I used to calculate the discount rate for this DCF model. Also, if you subtract debt from their cash on their balance sheet, they have about $2.6 billion of cash left over, which you use to factor into the DCF model. And then they currently still have about 1.6 billion shares outstanding. With these metrics in mind, it comes out to an estimation of about $26 per share, which is not very good news for AMD in terms of intrinsic value. Then we can see an industry analysis here comparing them to NVIDIA and Intel, two of their main competitors. If we look at the profit margins for these three companies, it looks like NVIDIA has the best profit margins with 16% net profit and 10% return on assets. AMD only has 3% net profit and 1% return on assets. Also, NVIDIA pays a dividend, and they're also trading at a lower PE ratio than the other two companies. So based on this, it looks like NVIDIA is performing the best out of these three companies. Bad news for AMD once again. So it looks like for their third quarter and fourth quarter earnings, they produced pretty impressive results, but as we saw from the DCF model and also this industry analysis, it looks like these are two areas where they could definitely improve. Then lastly, I wanted to compare AMD to some of the other companies we've looked at on this YouTube channel in the past. We can see that AMD is currently not trading below intrinsic value per share. They were trading below intrinsic value per share on this list before, but I've now moved them into the last place spot because the estimations have updated as a result of their new financial statements. You can see the rest of the companies here that were trading below intrinsic value per share. And then more recently, we saw that AMD had the highest growth rate, but that's been updated as we can see right here. It's currently at about 32%, which is still pretty good, comes in fourth place on the growth rate table compared to the other companies we've looked at so far. We can see AMD doesn't pay a dividend. These are the companies that are paying the highest dividend yield as of today. And then we can also see for gross profit and net profit, AMD only had about 30% gross profit and 1% net profit. Clearly not good enough to get onto these tables. These are really good profitability results for these companies here, as we can see from this top 10 list. And then for Q3 and Q4 year over year revenue and earnings growth, we can see that for Q3, we saw that their revenue growth was only about 4%, so not good enough to get onto this table, but their earnings growth for the third quarter was about 353%. That's the best we've seen for the third quarter out of any company we've looked at. And then for the fourth quarter, we can see they had revenue growth of about 10% and earnings growth of about 3,000%. Amazon was a little bit better at 3,400%, but it just goes to show that some of these tech companies had a really good fourth quarter, Meta included, although not at 3,000%, 200% is still pretty impressive. And then lastly, we can see for stock performance over the last 5 years, AMD is up about 600%, which puts them in the third place spot here, right behind Tesla and one of their main competitors, Nvidia. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of AMD. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see everyone in the next one.